Welcome to a new video on my home automation OpenHub and NodeRed series. A couple of months ago I received an email from Maria from Ubidots. So I set up an account for myself and I started loading data into it so I can just play around with the reporting functionality and some of the features in the solution. But after spending some time in it, I quite liked the whole concept and the idea, and I thought it would definitely worth to make a video because that could be something that you might want to consider in the future. So just to summarize in really, short terms, maybe in one sentence, I would say that this is a visualization and data processing platform for IoT devices. If you are from an industrial automation background, I would say this is like a SCADA system for IoT. So displaying data, visualizing, running reports, that sort of stuff. Previously, when I reviewed some commercial products, I got some responses in the comments saying that, oh, this is a paid platform, so if you have told me in the beginning, I wouldn't have looked at the whole video. I just want to state it right in the beginning that this is a commercial product, so based on your scale, there is a different monthly plan that you have to subscribe to. Okay, so since we have gone through this, let's look at what we are getting if we are using Ubidots. I'm just going to scroll through the main page because then it gives you really good idea what you get here. So I would say mostly it's a data storage and visualization platform. When you started with any network enabled microcontroller, for example, I remember looking at the first projects when the Ethernet head the Ethernet shield for the Arduino came out, and one of the first use case was that you connect a temperature and the humidity sensor, and then you start to send those data up to ThinkSpeak, and then you can see how the temperature changes. So I would say that it's Ubidots is something like that on huge steroids, because obviously it is a much more evolved system, but the idea is the same. You have a bunch of devices that communicate with Ubidots using various upload methods. We are going to look at what is being offered here. You specify your devices, you specify your data points, so like feeds, and then those data get stored and you can build some dashboards to visualize that data. I mean, you can see some examples here. And also you can run various reports, you can look at the data, try to make sense of all this information that we are gathering in an IoT ecosystem. And also if I'm just going through this, so if you see they are supporting loads of different devices, and they are trying to integrate with many different vendors and technologies that are related to IoT, and I'm going to delve into some of these in a bit of detail, but I'm really in this video I'm just going to give you an overview, mostly because in the industries they state that this is something for obviously agriculture, building automation. They also mention home automation, but I wouldn't use it for home automation because it's so heavy on data analytics that even though I also collect a lot of data around my house, quite frankly I don't really look at the data. If everything is working fine, it's fine to know what's the temperature outside, but knowing what was the minimum temperature in the last 2 weeks or how the temperature is going up and down, yeah, it's not really important. But let's say if you are in agriculture and you have all sorts of sensors around your field which is measuring temperature and humidity, and you want to know when, I don't know, your crops are getting thirsty, or there is too much humidity and there is potential for a fungus in a vinery, that would be ideal. So here again you see the basic layout, and you have all these devices that are communicating with the Ubidots server via, well, they are mentioning APIs here, but we are going to see that they can also support HTTP, MQTT, so it's really easy to connect with the technologies that we already know. And they have all sorts of analytics engines where they store the data, crunch the data, they can create some calculated figures and everything from your data. Obviously everything gets stored in a time series database, and from that database you can create all sorts of reports, dashboards, and you can specify some events. So that's like very basic, I would say very basic automation that you can set up in your scenarios. And on top of that, there is like a whole authorization user management concept behind this. And I think that really targets like proper commercial customers, where you're feeding all your data into the Ubidots servers, and then you would create various dashboards, and those dashboards can be accessed by various people. So, you have one specific view for your, engineers, and a specific view for your production people, and you can all manage them using user management. So you can create different users. You can also create different branding, so you can just brand your dashboards and reports based on your company branding, colors, and that sort of stuff. I haven't gone to that part yet. Today I'm obviously going to talk a little bit about the gateway, how you can get data in, and then some of the analytics functions, and then the reporting functions. And as I mentioned before, they provide APIs and SDKs and loads of documentation, and the protocols that they support is HTTP, MQTT, TCP, and UDP. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use MQTT in this example. And also there are some interesting other stuff with third-party data plugins, and for example LoRa. I just received an email a couple of days ago that they are supporting data download via the Things network, which is an open source LoRa network. So for example, you have a large area, maybe a field, where you have LoRa sensors, and those LoRa sensors talk to the ThingSpeak network, and that data can automatically be uploaded to the Ubidots. So you would have all that data collected by your LoRa endpoints loaded in here, and then you can do data analytics and visualization based on that. And as I mentioned in the beginning, there are various pricing models for different customers, and you can see the prices and the different limitations, and then some further details here. So if you are really interested, just go through the pricing option in the top menu. Before I go into my account, I just want to go through quickly through the documentation. First of all, because really everything is here, so you can just even if you don't know much about MQTT or HTTP or how this communication is done, everything is documented here. One side you have, for example, if you go to the API docs and the hardware, you see all the documentation here related to the various communication protocols. So for example, if you are interested in MQTT, you can find the different broker addresses here. They support non-TLS MQTT connection, so basically unsecure, which I'm guessing is not really good to have unsecure communication over the wide internet, but it has one big implication, that you can just have a simple ESP8266 on your wireless network, and that can communicate directly to the Ubidots server, which means that you don't have to maintain any infrastructure. You just have these endpoints, simple sensors, which talk directly, because as far as I know, a simple ESP8266 wouldn't be able to cope with a secure connection. Well, I might be wrong, but the non-secure one would definitely enable you to connect these low-powered or simple devices directly to them. And the other nice feature here is, as you see, you have these points in the documentation where they talk about some code, and you have examples, and you can even change whether you want a bash example or a piece of Arduino code or maybe a Python code. So yeah, whatever device you are using or whatever development environment you are used to, probably you can find some examples here. And just to further emphasize on the the support that you are getting, there is this other section here where you click on devices, and you can see all the various devices that they support. I mean, I guess most of them, they are around a couple of different infrastructures, but at least you can get some examples if how you can connect or how you can send data if you have, let's say, an Arduino with a GPRS shield, or if you have an Node MCU trying to connect to Ubidots via MQTT. And you just click here, you get another article, and then you have the Arduino code here. So it's really easy to get started. After I created my account, I quickly realized that I need data, and most probably I need lots of data to get some meaningful reportings. So the first thing that I have done is I've used the documentation just to know how I can set up a MQTT connection with Ubidots. And what I have done is I created another another server here in NodeRed, and I just started sending some of the stuff that I'm getting from my solar panels, external temperature sensors, and the weather stations which I have outside. And I started sending them to Ubidots. So I have a couple of weeks or a month worth of data, so I can just start some number crunching on that. Communication via MQTT is really, really simple. As you can see, I've just created the Ubidots server based on the MQTT details that I found in the documentation. And you just need to send in the data into the topics that you define, and that's it. The data starts to go into those devices or device variables, as we are going to see in a couple of minutes, and that's it. That's how you upload data. I've logged into my account, and you can see a very simple dashboard that I created a couple of days ago, and it's just using a few widgets just to give you a flavor of what you can get in the dashboard. But in order to get some dashboard or create a dashboard which actually has some meaningful data, first you need to feed in some data into the Ubidots system, and you do that under devices. So definitely the first thing that you need to do is you need to define your devices. And so what I have done is I have the Maplin weather station, I have the solar panels, I have a simple MyFlora Xiaomi, I think it's Xiaomi, plant sensor, and also have an energy monitor, which is just basically monitoring the energy consumption of the Raspberry Pi, so it's not really a lot. And these are feeding data into my account. And when you want to create a new device, basically you just click on New Device, and then you say what sort of device that you have. You have a Wi-Fi device, but I basically just selected a generic device, a blank device for all of these. And then you want to create, you specify a device name and a device label. And that's basically it. So, and once you have the device, then within the device you can have some variables. So for example, this Maplin weather station is sending in humidity values and temperature values. If I go back and if I take my solar panels, then it's sending three different variables in. So the power, the current generated power, the accumulated generation for today, and also the voltage which is coming down from all the panels. And creating the variable is very simple. You just so you create a row variable that's going to be called a new variable, and you just give it a name, and then that's it. So okay, I'm not going to do that. Okay, first it needed to be saved. Fine. And once you have your variable, then you can also do some stuff with it. For example, you can specify the unit. That's quite nice. I like that you can do a unit here. So then once you start putting anything related to this variable onto your dashboard, then it automatically brings up the unit, and you already see the data which is coming through. So as you can see, I have it's about almost a month of data here, and you can see the individual values as well, and you can zoom in, and it's pretty nice and it's pretty fast. You see how I can zoom in data, and then you can use the individual values. So that was probably a cloudy day, and that was a partly cloudy day. So that's how your data looks like. And let me go back. And similarly, you have some other devices which have its own variables. And Nice touch is that when you create a variable, you can create this raw variable, which is basically the feed which is coming in from external sensors, and you can also create synthetic variable where it is derived from other variables. Actually, I had to cheat a little bit because I didn't do this before. But let's take an example. It's like two examples. I have a sensor which is reporting Celsius. So this Maplin weather station is reporting temperatures in Celsius. So I want to convert it to Fahrenheit. So the formula is like this, and then the temperature, and then 32. So it says valid expression. That's nice. So I'm just going to call it temperature Fahrenheit. So when the next reading comes in, it would calculate the temperature, which is 22.5. Okay, so that's the inside temperature because that's my plant sensor, but that's going to convert it to Fahrenheit. And also, for example, if so most of the basic mathematical functions like adding, subtracting, multiplying, division, and the basic functions like, you know, sine, cosine, square, square root, there is a whole bunch of functions that are supported here. But also I can, and besides basic mathematical functions, what I can also do is I can create a synthetic variable based on a data series for a specific date range. So again, if I look at if I take the temperature as an example, and I want to know what was the maximum temperature for the last 24 hours, then I can use the max function, the variable, and then I need to provide the date range. And the date range in my case is 1D, which is 1 day. So if I do that, and I can call this the max temp. So that's going to be the maximum temperature, and the system will automatically calculate the maximum temperature for, you know, based on the variables that I defined, or based on the source data that I defined. Once you created your devices and the device variables, then here on the devices you have a few extra options. You can have groups and types, and also functions which are used for, you know, third-party connections, for example LoRaWAN. I'm not going to go into those details because I don't have any examples and any devices for that. But now we can go into the data section where we can create dashboards and events and reports. And I'm just going to leave the dashboards for the last because that takes probably the most time. And let's say events. So these are the simple automations, well, probably not automations, but yeah, it's basically events handling that you can set up. So I've created two examples here. I wanted to know if my plant sensor is detecting low moisture. So for example, if the moisture drops below 10%, maybe I want a notification that I need to water my plants. And this is what I have done here. So I've created two examples. The first would send me a Telegram message, and the other one would send me an email. But you can just click on the plus button, and as you can see, you have a if you want to create a new trigger, then you can just create on the create event button, and you have a nice wizard screen where you can set up your triggers, and you can set up, you know, multiple triggers, as in you select your variables. So for example, I want to maybe I want to use the power and a value. Okay, I'm going to talk about this position a little bit later, but let's say if the power value is less than maybe 10, and you can even specify a time period. So if the value is consistently less for, let's say, you know, 10 minutes, and now you can have some other criteria here linked with and or an or operator, so you can have multiple of these different values linked together. So if that's your trigger condition, then what should be the action? And here in the action, you can have a couple of different actions. You can have multiple for the same trigger. You can send an email, so you can send a text message, Telegram voice call, set a variable, which is a variable that you have defined. and a webhook and some other things, or a TT and download. So that's something for LoRa, so you can maybe control a LoRa device. And you can, okay, I want to send an email. So what's the email address? What would be the subject and the email? As far as I can see, with these triggers, you are basically just setting up, simple notifications, and I think that's sufficient in most cases, because if you have a scenario where you have just a bunch of sensors recording all sorts of environmental or other conditions, then in most cases you look at the data, you try to make sense of it, and sometimes if there is anything particularly high or low where you get a notification, you set up an event, so you get an email or you get a text message that something needs to be done because there are some extreme values. And even in an industrial system where you have let's say a pump house or like a water tower, then most probably you have the control systems in place where the pump would start if the water is too low, but then you would use these events just to send you a notification if the water level is below threshold, because maybe there is an issue with the pump couldn't start, or there is a blockage so the water is not flowing and your water tank is overfilling. So for those scenarios you would use the events to set up, but it's not really designed for a complete automation solution, because these events here are rather simple, and also the actions are more designed for notifications and not much else. The next section here under the data tab is the reports, and I've just created one simple report just to show how that really works. In the report you can specify various charts that you can club in different headers or different pages of the PDF report, and in that chart you have a load more other customizing capabilities. You can select the chart type, you can select the device and the variables that you want to display in a chart, and then finally you specify the delivery method. So for example, I want this report to be delivered to me every day at 8 a.m. This is how I want the email subject and the email body to look like. So once I have this running, I will get an email every morning with a URL. So I don't actually get the PDF as an attachment, but I just get a link and I click on that link and I get the report. I haven't spent an awful lot of time to make this report nice and pretty, but this is how it looks like. So that's my test report. This is when it was executed, and it was executed for a period. So this is something that you define in a report, that you want your report for the last 24 hours, and well, that's it. I mean, I would say this is a really bad example, because I've selected variables such as my solar panel, and the report is running at 8 o'clock just after the sun comes up, so I don't have an awful lot of data. But as you can see, we have a chart which has two different data points. One is the my solar power output, and also a temperature, which is again bad examples because they are vastly different values in terms of the range. So the temperature appears really flat because the difference here is only a couple of degrees, whereas the power goes up to 113 watts, which is not a lot, but this is what you get at 8 a.m. in the morning. So okay, this is not really the best example, but I think you get the idea of how you can just create a nice pack at a specific point of time and then deliver that via emails. And finally, we can go over to the dashboards. So I'm just opening the dashboards, and I'm not actually opening, well, I'm opening my dashboard because I only have one dashboard, but you can have several dashboards. So if I can click on here, new, to create a new dashboard, or sorry, this is new to create a new widget. What you see on the dashboard is you have this, well, first of all, you start with obviously with a blank canvas, and you start adding widgets. And these widgets obviously link to a particular variable for one of your devices. And of course, you have different visualizations. So here I have a very simple widget which just displays the last value from a particular variable. So in this case, that was the last value from, or actually this is the last update that I've received for the accumulated generation from my solar panel system. So today is pretty much an overcast day, so it is quite low, only 0.1 kilowatt hours. I have specified this device. If I go into the edit, I have specified this device to get the last value of the today variable from the Grova device. And well, I pretty much left everything as it is. So I just renamed it to solar generation, and that's pretty much it. Not only that I have specified the variable, but I can also specify what is the aggregation method. So you can just show the average, the last value, or the minimum or the maximum. So this minimum and maximum is what I used here. So I have three temperature measurements here, and these are all coming from the outside weather stations that I have. So this one shows the current temperature, so that's 13 degrees. And as you can see, it was updated, just basically 1 minute ago. And then I have used the same, so sorry, if I go into edit here, you can see it says last value of the temperature mapping. And if I go in here, then it's still the temperature and mapping, and then, but I use the aggregation method to maximum. And I've also added a special color logic, which basically just always sets it to red, so it's easy for me to say that that's a maximum. And in here I've done pretty much the same. I picked the same data point, so it's temperature mapping, but the aggregation method is minimum, and the color logic is basically just blue all the time. You can have these colors, so you have, like, you know, blue colors below 0, and I don't know, maybe orange up to 10 degrees, and then hot anything up after. So a couple of minutes ago I was showing you how you can create a synthetic variable to create a max or a min of a particular value, but you can do the same in reporting. You have the solar output here, which is, it's the same, it's the current generation, but it's shown in a gauge. So obviously you can specify the minimum and the maximum values. And it can also have its, custom color theme. The output voltage is shown in a battery widget. And similarly to these, it is just displaying a particular value, showing the last value of a particular variable, but it's displaying in a battery format as opposed to the gauge or just the simple static format. So humidity is here, and also if you want to display something in a chart, you can do that as well. And by the way, if I click here, you can see all the different options. So I've used the battery, I use the histogram, sorry, the line chart, which is here. I use the gauge, and basic, I think the text, and the thermometer. But as you can see, you can display the values in tables, you can have sliders, you can also have switches. So as I said, this is mostly a reporting screen, a reporting dashboard, but you can actually have switches, and you can, toggle those switches. So you can do a very simple manual control here as well. So, I haven't tested this, but I'm just assuming that if you're using MQTT, it will send out an MQTT message. And you can also use an indicator, which is the other part of the switch, which shows like a 2-state if something is on and off. And I would say one key feature of the dashboard is when you create this dashboard, you specify that, oh yeah, it's here. So for the first dashboard. So when you create your dashboard, you specify the default time range of this dashboard is 24 hours. So when let me just close this one. So when I want to see the maximum temperature, that max and min value, so all the aggregation methods are linked to the time scale that I have. So the default is 24 hours, but you can see that you can quickly change it to this month. So if I switch it to this month, my chart automatically updates. All the values here are showing the last value, so they don't change. But for example, the max and the min is now showing the maximum and the minimum values in the last month. And it happens to be that the minimum temperature was actually today. The maximum temperature was the 17th of February, if I look at the last month. But if I look at only today, obviously it's a different value because today the maximum was only 13 degrees. If in your home automation system you are using Grafana and InfluxDB, you probably see the same concept here, where all your reporting has a default time range, and then all your widgets are related to that time range, and you can just easily change them. And I think this is a very powerful and functionality which really helps you to understand data. It just change ranges and see how these figures behave in various data ranges. I also wanted to mention one more thing is we have looked at this page before when I talked about how you can find the broker URL, and if you scroll a further bit down which says send data, which obviously applies to the other communication methods as well, you can see some examples here how you are sending data into the via MQTT. Obviously the easiest way is just you send the data. But you can also send the data in JSON format where you can provide some additional information. So for example, you can see that in this example, we are sending in the temperature value, but you are also sending a timestamp to it. So if you want the timestamp to a particular value, not when the data was received by a server, you can provide your timestamp. And if you scroll further down, you can see examples how you can send in multiple values as well. So just one topic, you send in multiple variables. And the other important thing here is, look at this one. Besides the value, you can also send in position. So let's say you have a device which is mobile. It's on a rover or on a quadcopter, which constantly updates its latitude and longitude. So you are sending a position along with your data. And actually, this is something that we have seen here. So if I go back to my devices, and if I look at my Maplane, and let's just say, I just pick the humidity. You can see the humidity value changes, and then you also see the individual values going a little bit up and down. And you see the context. So the context is empty. So I'm not sending any information related to what is the name of this device, where this device is, or where is the latitude, or what is the geolocation of this device, because it's always the same, so I don't really care about that. But again, if I go into the dashboard, I can have some widgets which are based on these extra, context variable. Most importantly, a map. Where is the map? Yeah, map is here. So I can add my Maplane device, and I can just do OK. And no data is fun, because the values that I'm sending into all my devices, they don't, well, as we have seen, they don't have a context. But as per the documentation, you can also send in geolocation. And I think that also makes some really interesting use cases when you have, as I said, mobile sensors. So let's say you have a rover or a quadcopter which is flying over a field, and it's measuring near-infrared emission, and from that you can estimate, crop yield or other issues with your crop, because the near-infrared emission of vegetation usually correlates with the health of plants. So this is what is used in satellites as well, just to estimate crop yields or look at forests to see where the vegetation is dying by looking at near infrared. Maybe you can do something like this in here, just by combining the context values of various variables and displaying that on the map. And this is all I wanted to talk about the dashboard. So what I also want to spend some time on it is the analytics. And I haven't fully explored that, but it is looking at your data again. You're selecting different spans. So I here, as I said, I want to look at 1 month, and I'm looking at, for example, my temperature values from my plant sensor. So it's indoors, so it's not having a huge variations, but you can use the basic statistical functions here. So for example, in this chart, I'm displaying these values in the last month, but I can also add some other variables to it, and maybe hopefully do some correlation between. But even on this specific value, I want to see, for example, the moving average. So I can just superimpose that on the chart, so I can see the moving average. And I can also create charts of these. I can add additional variables, and I can do regression or other expressions in between these variables. Besides the Data Explorer, you also see 2 more options here. One is anomalies and forecasting. And if you click any of these, you get a pop-up message which basically says that it's under development and they are looking for your feedback. But this is something that I would be really interested to test because you hear about machine learning so much, and machine learning is fantastic in terms of learning patterns and doing predictions, and also figuring out if something cannot be classified or doesn't fit into a pattern. And I thought that even in a home automation scenario, it could be quite useful. And I was always thinking about if it would be possible to build a self-learning logic which learns how you conduct your life. And let's take a simple example. Let's say you have a power consumption measuring device which is connected to a plug where you plug in your iron. And let's suppose we have a logic which can learn how you use your iron. So for example, you iron a couple of times a week, and you usually iron for half an hour and then you finish. So then, the power consumption goes up for half an hour and then it will, go back to zero or, very little. So would it be possible for some sort of machine learning algorithm to tell that if the power consumption stays, pretty much constant for, let's say, 2 hours, or if it goes above a certain level, then maybe you left your iron, your iron plugged in, and you should get a notification that something is wrong. You should check it. And I'm guessing for some of these scenarios, you can come up with some simple rules. If it's a plug which you only use for the iron, so you can look at the daily usage, and if it caps, let's say, a couple of kilowatts, then you can send a notification. But there would be a lot of scenarios where it's much more complicated. The data has much more noise, and it would be much more difficult to have some sort of such discrete logic to really give you a good indication instead of a lot of false warnings. And the same applies to forecasting. I'm just trying to think about examples, but let's say if you have like a furnace heating your house, and then based on the temperature, the hot water the furnace is producing, and the inside temperature and maybe the outside temperature, predict how quickly your house is going to warm up. Let's say if you have gone away for a longer period of time and you turn the heating on, because it always takes a certain amount of time to heat up your house. So for that sort of scenarios, and probably a lot more other scenarios, these anomalies in the forecasting would be really useful. I would be really interested to see if these functions come online, and how well they can perform, and give you some sort of indication. So that's pretty much everything about the data. And there is 2 more sections here which I'm not going to touch at all, but I've mentioned them previously, is that in a larger organization you can use the users, the roles, and the organization to basically segregate your users and only give them access to certain parts of this whole Ubidots environment that you want to do. So you can have different dashboards which only apply to different roles or different users, so you can basically separate what users can do, what sort of data they can get. And also in the app sections, you can create your own apps, and you can have your own domains created where your clients or your organization can access that app specifically. I have been recording this for more than an hour, and probably even if I do all the cutting, it's going to be 40 or 45 minutes, which definitely the longest one. So I don't know, maybe I should have broken up into 2 pieces, but it's hard to really cut in the middle, and I just like to talk too much. So I think that's going to be it for today about Ubidots. I hope you like this video. There are a couple of thumbnails on the screen now, so you can use that to look at some of my other content. You can also click on my face if you want to subscribe to my channel, if you haven't already done so. But thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.